Hi there everyone. It's Mahmoud Shwaib here, and today I'm going to show you how you can use Grease Pencil and Blender to actually create this scene you see right here. So it might be a different scene, but I just want to show you the tool and how you can get started with the tool. Before I begin, I'd like to give a big shout out to TipTut, and I'll just open up his page on YouTube. So this is actually a TipTut, and has very excellent tutorial on getting started with Grease Pencil. So you can check out the crash course on 2D Grease Pencil animation in Blender. The first part is very interesting. It teaches you all you need to know about Grease Pencil. The video is a bit fast paced, but with a little patience and time, you could actually digest it. It took me like a week to actually go through the video and follow the steps, process, and then understand what I needed to do. So without further ado, let's just go. So the first thing I'll do is to create a new file. So I'll click on the Blender logo, the splash screen, and once that opens up, I'll just click on 2D animation. And okay, I'm just going to save this real quick. And once that opens up, I'm using a Wacom Intuos, so I think I can kind of like lift this to the screen, and hopefully you might see this. So I'm using a Wacom Intuos. It kind of helps, but if you can't afford it, that's totally fine. It's okay. There are a lot cheaper options out there. So the first thing I want to do is to once you open up the 2D animation, you have the Grease Pencil tools, and you can actually start sketching and drawing you can actually start drawing and sketching with the pencil. You can draw shapes. You can jump over here to this tool and actually erase any stuff, and there's an eraser set, so I can just choose a hard eraser, so I could just clear out these lines as well. If you, with your brush tool, you can actually draw things. One quick way to delete everything in your scene is to jump over to the object mode, and once you've selected anything in the object mode like so, you could just press delete and you'll get rid of it. So you switch back to the edit mode. So I'll just tab out right there, escape. Now I actually deleted the Grease Pencil object, which I'm not supposed to do. So I'll try doing an undo. What I want to do is to select these points. So I'll go to edit mode and rather drag and select. Now if I delete, I'll delete the points. So don't make the same mistake I did. I actually cleared out my points. So once you have a Grease Pencil object, if we look down at right, we have actually a default Grease Pencil object that has been created for us. It's actually called stroke. What we're going to do is to add our own Grease Pencil objects we can actually use to create our own workspace. Grease Pencil also organizes your work in layers. So let me just go ahead and show you right here. If you go down, once you select on a Grease Pencil object, and I'll click object mode here. So not the camera, I've selected the Grease Pencil object. I can go here to the object data properties, and you can see I have a layer here. So in case that's collapsed, you can just click that to collapse that. And you can see we have layers, and we have lines, and we have fills. The fills are going to work based on a brush, so I'll just go over to draw mode. So if I am on the lines layer, I can actually draw a line. On the fills layer, I can select a fill material. So if I click on the material here, I have a solid fill. I can actually use that solid fill and fill over an area. I'll just edit that real quick by doing an undo. So these are the default brushes it created for us. We have a square stroke. If I select that and draw this, we can actually see some dashed lines. I can actually zoom in and we can see these dashed lines like so. So that's for the brushes. So these brushes are going to contain data such as color, texture, and whatever property you select. You could also have a solid or a gradient based on the type right here. So if I'm on this solid stroke, we can actually see the stroke is checked, but the fill is not checked. If I click on the solid fill, we have the fill checked, but the stroke is not checked. So it means if I select a solid fill brush, like I did earlier, I can actually fill up an area like so. If I select the dots brush, I can actually use this to create this. And if we want to see that texture, we can zoom in and see these sets of dots. So basically that's how Grease Pencil works. Again, if you want to select some built-in tools, it has a pencil right here. So I'll just click on this pencil and we can select a different tool type. So we have markers, ink pens, chisel markers, F pens, and whatnot. The same menu here, we can have it here. If we just click this and click on items, we can actually see our tools here, which is quite awesome as well. To get rid of this, I believe we press N, and we can press T as well to have a nice clean area we can work with. So I'll just press T and N to bring this back. If we select the camera, we can actually zoom out and see our workspace and our work area. Let's go ahead and create a split view such that we can have a 3D view and a 2D view as well. So here, what I'll do is to just go over this section here, right click and do a vertical split. Did I get that right? Vertical split, and I'll just drag this over here, and right over here I can just select this tool to actually see this view right here. Now this might be too bright for your eyes, so what we're going to do is to select the world properties, go down to color, and I'll just drag this down a bit so we can have a neutral, kind of like cool tone like so. I'll just leave it at that. So next, let's get back to our object mode and then select a few properties for the camera. If we are on the camera, we can select the camera icon and then go over to the viewport display. I'll just drag this and set passport to 1. And let's see, let's click on the camera. Yeah, so because passport is 1, we can actually see this black outline right here. That's why if I do something like 0.8, you can actually see that area right here. It's a bit kind of like filled. So we are looking at the front orthographic view. That's the view that allows us to actually use Grease Pencil and look directly at that. So you can actually use Grease Pencil in a perspective view, but I just prefer to use the front orthographic. You can use the keyboard shortcut 1 to jump into front orthographic. So how can we start creating layers for our sketches? We just have one Grease Pencil object over here. So how can we create more objects? So as I said, we're actually on the object mode. So let's leave it at object mode and go to add and create a Grease Pencil and create a Grease Pencil blank. Now what happened is this: I'm already on the camera layer, so it added the Grease Pencil on the camera layer, which is not what we actually want. We want it to add the Grease Pencil object on its own standalone layer. If I actually zoom in right here and press the tab tool, you can actually see we have this object. And let's just rotate this and zoom out a bit so that we can select the camera. And then we can also select our Grease Pencil object by clicking on this section right here. Right, so that's our Grease Pencil object, and we know it's at the center. We can drag it and drag it out like so. And what we can actually do is to go to the Grease Pencil layer. We have a Grease Pencil layer called GP layer, which is a default layer that has been created for you. So what we're going to do is just add some data to this layer. I'm going to hide the camera because I don't want that cursor showing on the screen, and I'm going to switch over to draw mode to activate the Grease Pencil tools. And what we're going to do right now is to just sketch out a background or a simple sketch. So I'll just click this and drag and just create a nice kind of like mounting sketch like so. And I'll just do something like this to create some foreground. Like that. So this is going to be our little mountain sketch. Okay, I think that should be it. I don't want to overdo this. And yay, we have a little sun right here. You can increase the pen size by dragging the radius to make this kind of like larger if you want. And I'm using pressure sensitivity, so the more I press, the more this is going to kind of like show that effect. So I'll just do some weird bushes around here and then add a little tree like so. Okay, that's not the best tree ever, but I'm just going to add that anyway. It doesn't matter. And I'll add this, just something right here to represent some leafy structure. And we'll add more shrubs. And I think I should call that a day. Now, if we look at the 3D view, if we go back to our front view, or click our camera, we can actually see this object is constrained to this layer. But so what I'll do is go to object mode, and I'll scale this. So I'll do S. Let's see, scale. I need to select the object. Good. So I'll select this and I'll do an S just to drag that like so, because I want this centered in this view. So now that we've done that, let's just go ahead and keep working. So I'll just zoom in here like so I can look at this layer. So here we have this grease pencil object. We can even delete this one right here. So I'll select this and I'll just get rid of that stroke. So now in object mode, make sure I'm not selecting anything. I could just go to add and say grease pencil blank. Deselect that. I go to add grease pencil blank. Deselect, add grease pencil blank. And just click anywhere to deselect. So why am I adding these grease pencil layers? Well, these are going to be the layers I'll use to stack my objects. For instance, I have the sky, which is going to be behind everything right here. So I can just go ahead and deselect this. This is my first one. Yeah, this is it. So I'll just call that all, because that's where all my sketch is. And I'll switch over to the draw mode so I can actually kind of like draw something around. So if I even want, I can just frame this and just add a little nice rough frame around, because this is the region where I want to frame this artwork. I can zoom with the camera. If I'm looking at the camera, I can scale this to stay within the frame of my artwork. So that's super nice. So now that I have this sketch called all, I can see I have access to this layer. I can create more layers, right? But I want each layer to be a separate layer. That's why I created an empty grease pencil object. Next, I'm going to be creating materials, which are my brushes that will contain color information that I'll use for each layer. So let me go ahead and start with the foreground. And what I also want to do, I'll just drag this over to my 3D view. Just shift this, by the way, and just drag this. I'll just make this a bit bigger. And I'll select the camera. Okay, where's the camera? Camera's really further away. I think I hit the camera, so I'll just bring it back. And it's just right here. Okay, that's nice. So let's see. I'll just go to object mode and select everything. I'll just do G and Y and push everything back towards the Y axis so that I can have a nice view. I can see my camera. I think I might accidentally rotated that. Okay, that's not a problem. So I'll select the camera and I'll just do some GY and move the camera along the Y axis. So now what I'm going to do next is to push these layers closer to us. So this is going to be our foreground, midground, and our background. So for the foreground object, midground object, and background object, they are all in the same point. So the foreground object is going to be closer to us. So what I'm going to do is to pull the foreground object closer to us. And for some reason, that's 3. So I'll just do a GY and push 3 closer to the camera. I'll select 2. I'll leave 2 where it is, and then I'll select 1. And I'll do GY and I'll push that 1 point further away. Now that 1 point is going to be my background. That'll contain the sky. So let's go ahead and create the background for the sky. So I'll deselect that and I'll switch over to object mode and I'll just drag this view because I don't need this view right now. I'll just drag this to the side and I'll be actually looking at that view. This will be my major work area, but I'll just use this area to kind of like view what's happening here. So let me go ahead and create the background. So I'll just click this and go to draw mode. And for the background, I'll use a box shape. And then let's see our brushes. So if I click on material, I have a stroke material, but I need a material for the background. So what I'll do is to click on this plus icon and say new, double click on that, and I'll just call that BG matte for the background material. So now that I have that BG matte, what I'll do is to deselect the stroke and click on the fill. If I click the drop down arrow, I can actually select a color. So I'll just drag this up a bit and give it a nice bright sky color like so. I think I like that, so I'll leave it at that. Just make this slightly bright as well. So that'll be my brightest part. What I'll also do is if I click on the object data properties, I'll deselect use lights. And what I'll do next is to actually draw my shape. So I'll just go over here and then draw this shape like so. So now we actually see there's a problem right here. So if I select that and enter it, it's actually showing us that material. So, but this is actually in front. So how do I fix this? Well, let's actually go over through here and look at this. So this material here is actually in front of our sketch. We want this to be the furthest material away. So what I'll do is to go to object mode and make sure I select this material like so. I'll just use a GY and then push this back. So this is going to be the furthest item away. And we click on this, we can actually see our camera view. So what I want to do is to scale this so that it fills this entire area. So I'll just do S and just scale this till it fills up our entire workspace like so. So that's our background all set up. So right here, what I'll do is to go back to draw mode and I'll call that our background just to give it a name. Alright, so that's our background layer. We're done. So next, what we're going to do is to select our midground layer and then create the items or objects for our midground layer. To do so, I'll go to select our grease pencil object. Okay. And I'll switch over to object mode, select this layer, which is going to be our midground. In fact, I'll just name that midground, like so. So, and then it dropped midground right here, but don't worry, each time you're in object mode and you select the item, it'll tell you where the item is supposed to be located. So I'll just say foreground, like so. So why are we switching between object mode and draw mode? So let me tell you why. Right here, if I go back, if I'm in object mode and I select my background and I click on the material, look what happens here. We're on the background material. If I click on the layers, I can call this my BG layer. So it's looking at all the object properties for this grease pencil object called background. So because I'm in object mode, if I switch to foreground and midground, it will give me the properties. In fact, let's go ahead and change the name of the layer here to foreground. So I'll just use FG, and then the layer for the midground, I'll use MG. So I'm in the object mode, but look what happens when I jump over to the draw mode. So I'm in the draw mode right now, and I am in the midground. So, but if I switch over to the background and click and select this, I'm still actually on the midground from the object mode selection. So if I jump over here and begin to work here, I'm actually not working on the midground layer. So here it's actually telling me midground, but I'm on the foreground layer. So that's why it's important to switch to your object mode select your background layer, midground or foreground layer. Here we're going to work with the midground layer, so I'll select the midground layer, and when I jump back to my draw mode, I'm working on the midground layer. So let's create our artwork for our midground layer. So next I'll go ahead and select the material. I'll select this black material, and let's see if we can pick a do I want to use a pencil for this, or let me see. Let me try an ink pen with a fill. So again, I'll just press N to hide that tool. And this is a stroke, so I'm going to add a fill to this material. And for our fill, let's just select a sort of bluish background like so. Yeah, I think that's super nice. And since it's nature, let's make it a bit greenish, kind of like, and desaturated a bit. Yeah, I think I like that. So what we're going to have is, oh, sorry, I'm actually on the rectangle tool, so I'll just edit that and undo and switch over to our draw. Alright, so now that I'm back in our draw, we have a fill and stroke. So if I begin to draw this, we should actually see this information being reflected right here. So what I'm going to do is to just create, let me get rid of this fill and create a new material. And for our material, let's just call it FS, fill and stroke. And I'll open up the fill as well. And what I'll do is to select that greenish tone I wanted earlier on. Just drag this here. It is a bit green. I think I like that. And let's actually see that right now. So right now what's happening is I'm actually drawing the fill and the stroke together. So I actually have this, and for check our object area properties, I'll tick off use lights. So that's our midground layer. Let's switch over to our object mode, and let's jump to our foreground layer. If we actually look at this, our foreground is in front. So if we go back to our draw mode, and let me just try drawing these leaves. So now that in my foreground, I don't have a foreground material, but I can borrow from this material and clone a copy of that material. So to do that, I'll just click this plus to create a new material, and I'll click on this circular object, and I think I call that FS, and then here we'll click on this new material. So this is going to be FS underscore 001, which is a different material. What I'll do is just make that slightly darker, and I'll drag it over here like so. Cool. And it has a fill and stroke as well, because it's virtually taking the same properties. And I'll just create this leaf in front right here. So I think we even have some little grassy elements, so I'll just create them like so. And I'll just add some grassy elements, and each time I add these, you can actually see they're in front of our element right here. Let's create another material based on this, and just so that I can have a variation of this color for these shrubs here. So what we'll do is to click the plus icon and click new. Oops, so I made a mistake, so I'll just deselect that. So click plus, and then we'll click on the material symbol and create a new material based on FS01, and click here to copy that. So that's FS02, and what I'll do is just to change the color like so, so we can actually have a material for our leaf right here. So I'll just go over that real nice, so we can have one shrub. So what I'll actually do is to go back to FS1 and then change that material, and then have that shrub right there. And what we actually do is just add another shrub right here, and let's just add more bushes around. This is very terrible art. Forgive me, guys. Right, so that's our foreground element. And let's see if we have anything on our midground. So this is our midground. Let's add something else to our midground. So go back to object mode, select your midground. You can actually see we have these two brushes, and I'll create another brush to create this mountainous region based on FS, which is a material we created for our brush. So to do that, click the plus, click the world symbol, click on FS, and then click here so that we can have a material based on this copy. And then we can change this and then make this slightly darker and then drag this here. Good. So with that selected, let's see if we have our midground, and we have our brush which has a fill and a stroke, and we're using the ink pen. So we can now just sketch out, whoops. So sorry, I'm in object mode. I'm supposed to jump back to my draw mode so I can actually see my pencil tools right here. And what I'll do is just draw this outline for this mountain. Right, so we actually have our little mountain outline. Let's create so I think what we can do is to create another grease pencil object for this layer right here that will be further away and in between, you know, the background and this element as well. So we can actually try and do that. So what I'll do is to create this new layer. So I'll just go over here, go to object mode, make sure I'm not selecting anything. I'll go to add, and I'll add a grease pencil, blank grease pencil object. And once I've done that, it actually placed this right where, okay, it's not right where I want it. So I'll just drag this in between the foreground and the background so that we can create this mountain. So I'll just call this mountain. Right, so we have our mountain layer selected in our object mode. So let's get back to our draw mode. So within our draw mode, let's see if we can use or borrow any brush we've created and then use that. So I'll just click on new material, click on that, and what I'll use is the FS02, and I'll create a copy of FS02. Now it's FS04, which means it's a different material. And we'll select our base color and switch this base color to something else. Let's make this super bright, almost as bright as the background, just to indicate that this is further away. So it has a black stroke and a fill. So let's just go ahead and add that real quick. And there you have it. So for our sun, we can actually use this in the same layer. So I'll create a clone. Let's add a new material. And I'll use FS and create a copy of FS and make this sort of yellowish and bright. This will be a very terrible sun, by the way. So, but what we'll do is to click on the circle shape. So I'll just click on circle, and I'll just draw this like so. Yeah, it doesn't turn out real bad, right? It's not really bad. So I'll just hit the return key. So we can actually see here we have layered our objects, and well, I didn't expect that to happen. We've layered our objects, and we've created materials, and we've selected a color for those materials. And if we click on this clipping plane, now we can see that we have a problem. So how do we fix this? Well, that's straight up easy. What we will need to do is to zoom out a bit. And what I want to do is to select all these layers. So once I've done that, I'll make sure I'm in object mode and select all these objects like so. So now I've selected them. What I need to do is to scale them right now. So I'll make sure I'm in the front. Okay, that's the back front orthographic. Turn on my clipping plane, and I'll just do S and just scale everything down here. So it might actually be conflicting with our our sketch layer. We can get rid of our sketch layer and then begin to move these objects around. So what I'll do next is to select this guy and then move this guy like so. Select our mountain, or we can select these two and scale them so they can actually be quite large, like so. Right, so I'll select our mountain and scale it as well to make it quite large with the sun. And what I'll do is just drag that down a bit. So it becomes, these are the elements we're actually going to see right now. Let's see our foreground elements. We can use S to scale them. Okay, that's too much. Right, like so. And our sun is a bit out of scope. So everything around here won't be seen, and let me show you why. Remember, if we go to our camera and select our I don't think we selected our camera. Okay, yeah, we've selected our camera now. So we can set our passport to 1. So this is what our output is going to be. And let's select this guy and just drag this towards the left a little bit. And we can even lift this up. Right, so I'll just leave it like that. So that's what our output is going to be. It's a very boring artwork. So what we'll do next is to see how we can add a little bit of detail to the objects, right? So let's start with the foreground elements, these ones here. Let's see how we can add detail to our already existing art. So what we'll do next is to okay, I'm selected the foreground, which is great. So I'll switch over to the draw mode and make sure I'm on draw. And what I want to do is to make sure, okay, I'm on this layer. So let's create a new layer. And I'll just zoom in like so because we're gonna work now. And let's get rid of the camera. So I'll create a new layer above this and I'll call that shadows. Okay, that's I said shadows. S-H-A. Alright, so I have these this shadow layer. So what I'll do, let me just zoom out a little bit. And remember, I'm only working on the foreground elements right here. So now that I have the shadows, what I'm going to do is to create a mask to prevent any design I do from going out of the foreground elements. So with the shadows layer selected, I can click on this mask and click the drop down arrow, click the plus icon and tell it which layer I want to use to mask it. And because I have these materials for that layer, what I'll do is to go back to the shadows layer. Now it's actually saying this as a mask, and what's going to happen is this. If I try to I also use a tint brush. So if I try to create anything, it's going to be restricted only to the elements that are in this layer, but that's very terrible. So what I'll do is undo all of that and create a brush for the shadows. So a material for the shadows rather. So what I'll do now is just click on this plus and say new material. And I'll just say shadow. I could have actually based that material off one of the base colors like FS1, but I just want to do this here. So I'll just use a fill without a stroke, and for the fill, let's just select a dark color like a shadow color. Yep. Yeah, I think that's a nice shadow color. And what I'll do here is switch over to my ink pen and then begin to draw that shadow right here for the grass. I'll draw another little shadow for the grass. And we could just go around and create these shadows, and please do a better job than me. I'm actually destroying this. So we can even do more for the grass like so. And when we're done, we can go to the shadow layer and mess with the opacity, because this is terrible. We can even set the blend mode to say hard light or multiply. And I think multiply is terrible, so I'll set it back to regular, and then let's drag this to kind of like reduce this. And if we wanted to create highlights for it as well, let's create a layer called shiny. And what I'll do is to create a mask for shiny as well. So let's turn on the mask and add the foreground. And what we'll do is to now create a material for shiny. So I'll say a new material. I'll say shiny. Now once I have that shiny material, I'll set the only fill. And for the base color, I'm just going to use something. I can sample this color, right? So let's use the color of the sky. I think it should be not complaining now. Okay, good. So it's plugged in now. Wow, forgot to charge my system. That's terrible. So now that I have that shiny, if I get back to the layers, I'm on the shiny layer, and I can just draw out some highlights like so. I'll just undo that real quick and just draw little highlights all around this object. And again, when I'm done, I'll just drag this to, let's say, multiply. Okay, that's not cool. Hard light, terrible. Let's say add. I'll just leave it as regular and then drag this down. Like so. So hopefully this is giving you an idea, and hopefully you're going to create a better artwork that I have done. This is one of my most terrible artwork ever, but yeah, so you can actually jump to any layer you want. So if we exit draw mode and go to object mode, actually I think to do this you shouldn't be always clicking the draw mode object mode. I think it's tilde, right? So if you press the tilde key and press 6, you're in edit mode, and 8 you're going to go back to draw mode. So if I want to go to edit mode, I'll just do the tilde and then say 8, edit mode, draw mode, tilde, and 6. So I'm in edit mode right now, so I'll use tilde and 8, and I'm in draw mode. So that's the best way to do this. So tilde and 6, then I'll select, say, the midground, which is this area right here. So I'll do my tilde, or I'll just do the regular way. I know how to do it anyway. So I'll just jump back to draw mode. So I'm in the midground layer. Now I'm in the foreground layer. So let's see, let's go to object mode. And that's foreground. Let's see, midground. And each time you're in the appropriate layer, you'll actually notice your materials changing to update you. So once we've done that, we can now go back to draw mode. So I'm in actually my midground layer. So if I wanted to, say, add some shading to the midground layer, what I'll do is to create a new layer. I'll just say shade, and for that shade I'll just select a brush. I can use the FS03 brush, it's not a problem. So I can just create a mask and then tell it to use the midground as that mask. And let's hope that our brush doesn't have a, okay, our brush has a stroke. I don't want to use the stroke. So let's see. So all our brushes actually have a stroke. Now the problem is if I turn off this stroke then any layer that uses this stroke is now going to have that stroke as well. So I could turn off the stroke and then draw the shadows, but that would be nice, right? So what I need to do is to just create a new material, or we can use any material we have here, but I'll just create a new one and say new, just say fill, and we'll just use a dark value since we're working with our shadows. I'll just leave it at that purple. It doesn't matter, it's not going to hurt anyone. And you can actually see what's happening here as well. Now it's actually overriding this, but it's not going out. So to solve the problem, I might actually bring back my stroke and make sure it's 100% black, such that when we try to fill this, it's going to, okay, yeah, it's actually going over this. Now I don't know the solution to that problem, so I'll try and find out how I can solve that problem. I think it might be, and you can also change this to a gradient or a texture if you have a texture. Well, let me just see that. Turn off use lights. Turn off our masking. Now you can actually see it's actually out of here, out of this. I think the problem might be if I set this down. Okay, it disappears if I set it below. So honestly, I don't know about this. If you actually know why, if I'm overlapping, it's complaining. I think it's one of these options. I think there's an option that you can actually set your strokes such that when one stroke is above the other stroke, it actually shows it. So there's an option somewhere. Like I said, I'm kind of like new to grease pencil. Auto merge, it's actually a good time to talk about auto merge. If you have auto merge on, so let's say for instance I started drawing this and it's not allowing me to draw anything. Wow, yay. So let's say we have started drawing and we stopped. Alright, so we can just use auto merge and continue drawing. If it's close to it, it's going to merge that, and for some reason it didn't work. So let's see, I started here and yeah, good. So let's see here, and then I stopped. I'll just pick up from there and continue. So you need to be really close to the point for the auto merge effect to take place. So that's it, guys. I hope this was kind of helpful. And again, don't forget to check out, let me just open my web browser and give a shout out to this gentleman right here called TipTut. His tutorials are very awesome, especially when you want to learn animation. So hopefully this is giving you an idea on how to use Grease Pencil. Remember, there's always a startup file with a 2D animation. Jump to your splash screen, you can actually see a 2D animation. And I'll just show you an example of, let's see, yeah, I'll save this one. I'll just call that .test. And I'll save that file. And then we can actually open up another sample project we have. So yeah, so that's actually what I did to create this one. I actually looked at a little bit of color palettes and then used those colors to create this as well. And I'll show you another example. Go to open recent. And I think I call this one Toon. Okay, yeah, so this is me trying to sketch in a cartoon character. Again, you can actually see the ink lines, and I have some rough sketches here. I have some lines, and I actually went over them with those lines like so. And for the fills, I actually have a fills layer I have right here. So if I click on this solid fill and then change the color of the solid fill to say something like this, right? I can actually now start filling this character like so with some color, right? Because that's a fill, it's not going to affect, you know, the layer. So I can just drag this color, and you can actually see there's some overlaps right there, and you can actually use this to, you know, kind of like mask your character, or create sections, or create some shadows for your character. And then you can select the tint brush to, you know, add a bit of tints based on a color you've selected. So obviously I'm not going to use that color, we could use something else. I'll use a tint value to just tint this, but I'm not going to do that. So this is just an example of what you can do with the grease pencil. Hope this helps, and see you guys soon.